Welcome back to The Explainer. You know, if you're a focused learner trying to master English, today's source material hits on a really common frustration. You want to speak fluently, right? You're studying grammar, you're memorizing vocabulary lists, but you still feel totally stuck when it actually matters. Well, today we're diving into the data, and it reveals one of the simplest and honestly most strategic habits for completely transforming your fluency, and that is daily reading. It brings up a super relatable question. Why does speaking English feel so incredibly difficult? I mean, you can understand the concepts perfectly in your head, but the second you open your mouth to speak, poof, the words just vanish. Your mind goes completely blank. The source material points out exactly why this happens. See, traditional memorization methods just kind of fail us because they trap words on a page without actually connecting them to any real lived meaning or context. Section 1. The struggle versus the solution. Okay, think about the traditional method of trying to memorize an isolated word like journey. Honestly, it's exhausting. And it's usually temporary, right? Because there's no surrounding context. But when you naturally stumble upon it in a sentence, something like, her journey to success was difficult, but she never gave up, suddenly, boom, the word has a feeling. It has a real situation and an emotional anchor. You aren't just cramming a rigid dictionary definition into your brain. You're experiencing how the word actually behaves in practical English. Reading literally gives vocabulary life. And it's not just about context either. It's fundamentally about consistency. Repetition creates learning naturally. When reading becomes a regular habit, these highly useful word combos like make a decision or make a plan, they just keep popping up. The first time you see them, it's a new concept. The second time, hey, it's familiar. By the third time, you totally own it. By strategically planning just 10 minutes today and 10 minutes tomorrow, you're feeding your brain exactly what it needs without ever forcing it to memorize a thing. Now, the source material highlights this truly game-changing vocabulary notebook technique to capture this. Check this out. When you read a new word, you don't just jot the word down by itself. You write it alongside the exact sentence you found it in, and then, here's the magic step, you write your own sentence. So you take a word like improve. You log the book's specific sentence, and then you strategically create your own version, like, daily practice improves my confidence. This instantly turns a passive word you just kind of recognize into an active word you can confidently use in real life. Section 2. Filling your language tank. The source material uses a fascinating analogy to explain the mechanics here. Think of your brain as a giant water tank. Speaking is an output skill. It's the water flowing out of the tank. But obviously, if no water ever goes into the tank, it's going to run completely dry. Reading is that high-quality input that fills your language tank right back up. Your mind physically cannot produce good, fluent spoken English if you aren't consistently feeding it quality English input. Every single page you read is quite literally preparing your brain for your very next conversation. So this rich input feeds the brain in a few really distinct ways. Just like a kid learning their first language, reading repeatedly exposes you to correct English. So instead of spending hours agonizing over complicated grammar formulas or stressing out over which specific tense to use, seeing sentences structured correctly on the page trains your grammatical instincts. Over time, you just start to feel what sounds right. And honestly, that drastically reduces the huge anxiety so many of us associate with grammar. And this directly targets one of the absolute biggest hurdles in language learning, translation. You know that slow, hesitant habit of thinking in your native language, mentally searching for the correct English words, arranging them in your head, and then finally speaking? It is deeply exhausting. Well, the ultimate goal is understanding and thinking directly in English. Because you're constantly exposing your brain to native patterns through reading, it helps you bypass your native language entirely. It makes the whole path from thought to speech completely seamless. The sources actually compare this whole process to learning how to drive. Remember the very first time you sat behind the wheel of a car? The controls were confusing, checking your blind spots felt overwhelming, the whole thing was super stressful. But with enough practice, driving just becomes second nature, right? Well, reading creates that exact same deep familiarity with English. The more you read, the less intimidating the language feels. And that underlying comfort, that is the absolute foundation for real speaking fluency. Section 3. Building confidence and knowledge. A core philosophy presented in the material is that mistakes are just a natural part of the learning process. You absolutely do not need perfect understanding to make massive, measurable progress.
I know a lot of learners feel this immense, really unnecessary pressure to understand every single word they read, which, let's be honest, just leads straight to burnout. The key here is to focus entirely on the main meaning. And hey, there is absolutely zero shame in reading easy beginner-level English. Easy English builds rapid confidence, and confidence always precedes fluency. But beyond just the mechanics of the language, this habit significantly expands who you are as a communicator. The material points out that reading fosters entirely new perspectives, sharpens critical thinking skills, and builds lifelong wisdom. I mean, a person who reads regularly is continuously filling their mind with diverse ideas, cultures, and concepts. So what does this mean? It means when you finally do speak, you won't just have the right English words, you'll actually have fascinating, engaging topics and opinions to share with people.
Section 4, creating a daily habit through strategic planning. So how do we actually execute this habit without feeling completely overwhelmed on day one? We look at the core of strategic planning, the water on stone principle. In language learning, daily consistency is infinitely more powerful than occasional, super intense study sessions. You don't need some grueling, hours-long, perfect study plan. You just need small, strategic habits. Think about it. A single drop of water seems utterly insignificant on its own, but repeated consistently over time, it has the power to carve straight through solid rock.
Let's look at these strategic numbers here. 5. Imagine planning to read just 5 easy pages a day. It is a goal so strategically small that almost anyone can bypass that initial wall of resistance, or, procrastination. It literally takes maybe 10 minutes out of your entire day to accomplish. But consider how beautifully that compounds over a short period. Those tiny 5 pages strategically add up to 35 pages a week. Suddenly, that incredibly small effort you put in on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, it begins to accumulate into real, highly measurable progress by the weekend. And that translates to well over 150 pages a month. By strategically setting a seemingly microscopic daily goal, you've essentially tricked your brain into reading half an entire book every single month. Your brain is now encountering thousands of new words, diverse grammar patterns, and highly natural expressions, and it's all because you started with a simple 5-page strategic plan. The sources break this execution down into 3 really strategic steps. Step 1, start small, dedicating just 5 to 10 minutes a day. Step 2, choose easy content you genuinely enjoy, whether that's history, mystery novels, or biographies, and avoid boring dance textbooks at all costs. Step 3, be relentlessly consistent. Tie this new habit to an existing routine, like reading right after breakfast or right before you go to sleep. Don't rely on fleeting motivation. Rely on a strategic, structured routine. The source material leaves us with an incredibly inspiring thought on the power of this kind of compounding effort. You do not need giant actions to change your life. You need small actions repeated every day. Reading is just this profound long-term investment in your English, your knowledge base, and your future opportunities. So think about it. If true fluency is waiting on the other side of just 5 easy pages a day, will you finally turn the page? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.